Generally speaking, the easiest way to collaborate with external guests is to use Microsoft Teams. While there may be specific scenarios where you want more control over who can access certain locations, we will not discuss those today. In this scenario, we will give all team owners the ability to invite external guests. Team members cannot invite external guests, and external guests cannot invite other external guests. All external guests must configure multi-factor authentication, and they must accept the company's terms of use. To start, we'll go with the team owner, who simply needs to go to their team, select the ellipse, and select Add a Member. Then they would go ahead and paste in the members they would wish to invite. Go ahead and click Add, enter in any additional guests in their email, and then go ahead and hit Close. Now, as the external user, I receive an email invite to join the team. Here we will click on Open Microsoft Teams. Upon clicking this, we get to review permissions that are being requested to join this company. So we'll go ahead and hit Accept. We'll use the web app. And now, because multi-factor authentication is in place, we'll be prompted for more information. So we'll click Next. And now, depending upon the settings the company has chosen to select, I can go ahead and I can choose to register my mobile app. I'll receive notifications for verification, and I'll click Setup. Here, I'll go ahead and select Add Account from my phone, select Work or School Account, and scan the QR code. Once that completes, I now have an ID associated to my Authenticator app. And I'll click Next. Currently, the multi-factor is confirming that we have activated a device, and we'll click Next again. So now, on my mobile app, I've received a prompt to approve my sign-in. Now, in case we lose our app, we need to fill out some additional information. Fill out our number, click Done. As part of the acceptance process, we also needed to acknowledge the terms of use for the organization. So I can certainly click on this, expand, and read through this. I'll go ahead and click Accept. Once the team is open, we'll be taken through a basic tour of Microsoft Teams before we can actually join into the conversation. So we'll quickly click through. Now I'll thank everybody for including me, and I'll go ahead and upload a file. So I've gone ahead and uploaded a file, and I've also asked Diego to work on this file with me. So we can see that Alan has uploaded the file, but Diego sees that it's a CSV file. He's going to respond to Alan and ask him to upload the Excel file. So we can see the notifications and everything are working here. I do want to point out that as a guest, Alan does not have the ability to actually delete his conversations. So even though he made a mistake, he cannot go in and remove this. Whereas if we look at Diego, Diego can, as a member and part of the organization, can certainly delete his conversations. So as Alan, we'll go ahead and we'll upload the new file. Now we can see both users are actually in the document and they can work on them simultaneously. One other thing to note, external guests in this particular team, as it's a per team setting, do not have the ability to create new channels, nor do they have the ability to delete channels. Now again, this is open to the team owner and their decisions. Now within the environment, we also have enabled the ability to track for data loss prevention to ensure that data we don't want shared is not shared. In this case, there are a couple of ways we do this. So as the employee, I can see there is a file called IP details. If I click into this file, I can see a couple of keywords: OxyTech, TechFit, OxyFit. These are all actually tracked by data loss prevention policy. If I go and I look as the guest user, I can see that I do not have access to view that file. Looking back as our internal employee, if I go out to the SharePoint site and select that file, I can see that this item contains sensitive information and it can't be shared with people outside of the organization. Now let's look at conversations. If I was to type one of those keywords in, within a couple of seconds, the DLP policy will detect that it was sensitive information and block. We also have a requirement to restrict the user from downloading or printing files. We have set this up through SharePoint. If a user were to go to Files and then select Download Files from within Teams, they will receive a message saying, "Sorry, we ran into a problem. The file didn't download." If they were to click into the file, again, they would have the ability to see download and would try again. But again, the file would not download. If the user attempts to print the file, they will see a blank page. Also, if they were to go out to SharePoint, they would receive the warning message that they are not allowed to download, print, or sync using this particular device. And again, they could still click into the file and use Office Online to edit. One other thing to point out is how this team works with inviting external members. So again, as Diego, I can certainly go to the ellipsis, click Add a Member, and try to type in external account. You can see we're not finding any matches. And I'm not being allowed to invite external. Now, if I see internal, say Isaiah, can select and send a request to invite him.
One thing to note that since file content is stored in SharePoint, it's already using virus detection. If virus or malware is detected, the content is flagged and the users cannot download the file from the browser. Follow the links for more details.
Now let's look at the settings we have enabled to ensure guest access functions the way it does within Teams. First, we'll go to the Teams Admin Center. Here, we'll go to Org-Wide Settings, Guest Access. And we can see that we've enabled the ability to allow guest access in Teams. We also have additional settings around calling, meetings, and messaging. In our scenario, we turned off the ability for guest users to delete sent messages. Next, we'll look at messaging policies. And here we just have one policy. And this policy is where we control information for our internal users. And here you can see owners can delete sent messages is off, but users can delete sent messages. So what this means is owners cannot delete other users' messages, but they could delete their own. And same for members, deleting their own, such as we saw Diego do. Next, we'll look at the SharePoint Admin Center. Here's where we control access to the SharePoint sites. If you go to Access Control, you'll see the ability for unmanaged devices. Selecting that gives us the ability to enable the limited access mode, ensuring that guest users would only have web-only access. This also, at this point in time, exists for any user within the organization that may be able to be on a joined machine. Now, let's go look at the Admin Center for Azure Active Directory. First, we'll go to Users, and then User Settings. Here, we will look at Manage External Collaboration Settings. Here's where we can see that guest user permissions are limited, is set to no. This is to ensure that when a guest user is in your environment, they can still search for users. Admin and users in the guest inviter role can invite. So this is set to yes, to ensure that any admin within an organization can invite guest users, even if we did not allow them into Teams. We could also allow them into other applications. Members can invite. So while we can't invite external users in Teams, this does give the ability for things like SharePoint. And then guests can invite. We have turned this to no to ensure that guests cannot invite other external parties. You'll also notice collaboration restrictions. In this particular scenario, we do not limit any access into our teams from any domains, but you do have the ability to deny invitations to specified domains, as well as allow invitations only to a list of domains. This would be your most restrictive capability. Next, we'll look at conditional access. Here we are using two policies. You'll notice the SharePoint policy here, so let's look at that first. In our particular scenario, we have use app enforced restrictions, as you can see here. So this takes lead from what was already set in the SharePoint environment where we set it to limited web-only access. If we look at users, we have the ability to apply it to all users that might not be using a domain-joined device, or we can select, again, only our guest and external users. Now, let's look at Teams guest users. This particular policy is set up to ensure that guest users are completing MFA as well as accepting our usage terms. So as we can see under specific users included, we are already including guest and external users. Underneath Cloud Apps or Actions, we have selected the Teams application. Under conditions, we have 2 for client apps, basically browser and mobile apps and desktop clients. And then under access controls, we have grant access when users have completed the multi-factor authentication and have accepted the oximetry terms of use, so your company's terms of use. And we require all of the selected controls in order to access. Now let's take a look at how we configured the data loss prevention policies. In our Security and Protection Center, we first created our custom sensitive information type. Here you will see intellectual property, and as I select this, I can see the keywords of OxTech, OxFit, and TechFit are what I'm using to locate intellectual property. Your organization will most likely have more complex settings here, and that may be proximity of words together. That could be introducing regular expressions to also denote which counts as intellectual property. Next, we'll look at our data loss prevention policy. Here we can see intellectual property, and as we select that, we can go into edit mode, and we can see the locations that it's been applied to, which include SharePoint sites, OneDrive accounts, Teams chat, and channel messages. If we look at our policy settings, we can see that we detect when content is shared with people from outside the organization. We're looking at our sensitive information type that we just reviewed. And we can see that we restrict access as well as notify users with policy tips and emails and send incident reports. You can customize this to show the different levels of match accuracy and instant counts. So right now, for a low count, we're looking where we see 1 word. All the activities we've been performing today have been captured by Office 365 Audit Logs. In order to review those audit logs, we are leveraging Cloud App Security. Here, I have a report pulled up that's focused on Alan DeYoung, our external guest. Here I can see all the activities he's performed within my tenant. This includes accessing files, where he's seeing DLP rules that match. We can view pages he's viewed, we logons, failed logon attempts. We can also see his updated user profile information. And this is showing us when he went and set up his multi-factor authentication. So all that is captured here. If I was to dive into one of these folders or files, I can see additional details, such as what file or page was actually viewed and accessed. And then I can look at raw data if I needed to. Another report I have pulled up is focused on DLP rule matching for Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive for Business. Here, I can see a bunch of different rules, and again can dive into that rule data so I understand what policies were flagged. So I can see we matched sensitive information type and that we were actually testing it. So we didn't actually block anything. And it was going against the policy of IP internal. In another report, I'm actually looking at the files report. Stale files that were shared externally. Basically, these are files that haven't been accessed recently that I can look at removing shared activities. And as you can see, we have additional actions we can take when we're using the full MCAS solution, such as putting that file in the trash, applying classification labels, putting it in quarantine, or automatically making it inherit its parent permissions, therefore potentially removing external access. In our last report here, we're actually looking at all members that have been added into Microsoft Teams. Here we can see EXT stands for those external members, as well as others where we are just seeing internal users being added. Here we actually see a report that I drilled into for this particular user. We can see all the actions that they've been taking within Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Online, or Office 365 in general. If I look at Office 365, I can see all the details around this particular person.